Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much again for sticking around for this next conversation. Dan Murphy with you from CNBC, and I am thrilled to be joined by this panel of experts to discuss all things global markets in 2025. So Robert Solomon is here. He's Dean Stern at New York University in Abu Dhabi. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Claire Woodman is head of EMEA and CEO at Morgan Stanley. Hani Kablawi is the chairman international at BNY, and Shamsheer Bayali is founder and chairman of Bajil Holdings. And of course, all have exposure to the global markets with unique perspectives and insights. So let's dive straight into the conversation, and in particular, the factors influencing global markets. So Claire, first to you, when you think about the outlook for 2025, what type of global market environment do you anticipate for the year ahead, and how is it going to impact Morgan Stanley?
Thank you, and I'm really pleased, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I think before we start, just to focus on global, let's talk about what we see here. So Morgan Stanley has been doing business in the GCC for 50 years. We opened our office here in Abu Dhabi earlier this year, at the start of the year. It has to have been the easiest process that I have experienced in terms of going into a new market. So our clients are really excited, and really to underscore it being the capital of capital, because we have really seen this transition from the GCC and UAE as being an exporter of capital to seeing the two-way of capital flows. And I think that's something that's really been underscored in the paper. When we zone out and look at the global outlook, we're actually optimistic about what 2025 holds, not just for the region and the region's role globally, but globally we think that the environment is very conducive for transactions and deal makings, and for our clients to be able to get their strategic ambitions and their business plans executed.
And I think post-election, we're also seeing that being reflected in the equity markets, at least in the United States. Right now, it's Dow 45,000, S&P 500 and NASDAQ tracking at fresh record highs this week as well. And macroeconomically, the outlook also looks particularly constructive for Abu Dhabi, for the UAE, for the Gulf region, and also global markets, in particular the United States. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. But Hani, wanted to come over to you. What's your view on 2025? Am I being too optimistic myself when I talk about not just what's happening in the capital markets? Is that necessarily a reflection of the business environment or the economy broadly?
I think you mentioned US and the region, and these are two places to be optimistic about. I'd call out a couple of things just so that we temper the optimism with a little bit of kind of risk management insight. We do look at, we think, by the way, our analysts are calling another 5% rise in S&P 500 next year, and potentially another 5% in bonds as well, which makes bonds potentially a little bit more attractive. Save for the risk of stagflation, we are watching debt levels and fiscal balances in developed economies broadly. We're also watching potential domestic political disruption in developed democracies, especially. Who would have thought that Korea, France, Germany would be where they are from a kind of domestic political situation today? So yeah, I think the optimism in the US, for all sorts of reasons, I think there's a lot of investment going in the US. I do think that since the rise in US yields in 2022, a lot of money was sucked out of emerging and growth markets back into the US. That has not reversed yet. And I think that probably likely continues in a Trump-led administration. So US investments in the US. And then I think this region, any region that has the types of surpluses that this region has, and the focus that we're seeing here today, and have been seeing for a few years now, on bringing investments back into the region, these are very positive developmental opportunities.
Absolutely, and Shamsheer, you're running a business that's exposed to the emerging and developing markets. We've framed a lot of the conversation around what's happening in the United States, what's happening in DM. What are you seeing in EM right now?
So we've always been an emerging markets play. We're very active in GCC and Africa. We have our presence in India as well. And whichever way we go, we will need more healthcare for sure. Because with the advent of AI and with less resources and more people getting very educated about their health post-COVID, we find that the need is more. So we are very excited about the prospects. We are excited about Abu Dhabi's position in the global market in terms of becoming the gateway. Because we say we are catering to a 10 million population, but we are in fact catering to a 10 billion population with all the trade agreements that are signed between UAE and multiple countries, which allows us the access to provide healthcare. So we are very bullish on 2025, especially with the kind of global market positions we have got with the help of Abu Dhabi leading the way. We always see that as the tailwind that is created. So we are very excited about 2025 and beyond.
I like it. So the bull case staying intact on this table here. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is, of course, we're here in Abu Dhabi. There are deep pools of public and private capital moving around this emirate, this country, and this region. Dean, when you think about this more broadly, what do the emerging markets need to do to attract and draw in more stable flows of foreign capital? This is important as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Abu Dhabi has done well, in the UAE in particular, is it has the formula. When I think about sort of cyclical effects versus structural effects, when I think about the structure of the UAE and Abu Dhabi, if we think of it as a recipe, all of the ingredients are there, right? You have a stable political environment, you have institutions that function, institutions that work, you have opportunity, a tremendous amount of opportunity. The demographics are really favorable to Abu Dhabi. This is one of the reasons that we are here. The Stern School of Business is here in Abu Dhabi because we see the promise. And one of the things that we hear when we are out speaking with constituents is that one of the greatest areas of need is building up of human capital and talent, educating talent. And that's what we're doing here to help develop the business leaders, the next set of managers for the future. So when I think about emerging markets, I think, and growth markets in particular, I think places like Abu Dhabi are in a really, really favorable position because, again, like I said, all the ingredients are there. When I think about some of the other emerging economies, I think about cyclical effects. And while I agree that the broader global macro environment looks positive, I do see some risks. I see risks, for example, from tariffs and a potential trade war, if such things arise. I see the potential for inflation, say, in the United States. What happens if these things come to pass in the United States? You can observe, say, a strengthening dollar. What happens with a strengthening dollar? Well, for emerging growth markets, what you have is those countries that rely on commodities that are traded in dollars will feel the pinch. Those countries that have dollar-denominated debts will feel the pinch. Cyclically, you might have some investments that are drawn back to the United States that don't flow to growth and emerging economies. But places like Abu Dhabi, again, that are structurally very sound, I think will continue to be an attractive place for foreign businesses to invest.
Claire, can I get you to respond to that as well? Of any of the risks that have just been highlighted, is there anything that also gives you pause?
For this particular region in UAE, I actually think that the combination of partnerships between local businesses and pools of capital here with international businesses and this real prioritization of knowledge transfer, technology and innovation, I think actually it's set up to be really well aligned. And I do think that there is a prudence about the approach from policymakers here and from the government. So there isn't just a growth at all cost and without regard for the risks. So the opportunity set is there, but there is a real understanding and a forward-looking, proactive approach to management of risk. So
I had the chance to read the Capital Flows in a Polycentric World paper on the way over here. It calls out three things that are positive variables that support the flow of capital into a region, and I think Abu Dhabi and the region overall have them. It's stability, and that's political and economic stability. It is the availability of investable projects, companies, and markets. And it is, for lack of a better term, rule of law. Rule of law really is about access, transparency, and fairness in treatment of all investors, equal treatment of all investors. And those things are foundational for any market that is looking to grow. I might add a couple to those. One of them is public sector investment leading the way and showing the way and then crowding in the private sector. That is a very big, and we're seeing that in places like Mexico, France, Argentina, and other places where the public sector is playing a role to try and get the private sector to crowd into investable projects. And then the last one that I would say is really important is just market infrastructure. The availability, the ability to come in and out of a market whenever you want and through as many instruments as you want. So that's market infrastructure. I think the region, I'd give Abu Dhabi high marks on some of these, and some of them we see the progress that's being made.
Yeah, I would agree and echo that. And add one more thing, which is that, as I was mentioning before, I think all the ingredients are there, especially here in Abu Dhabi and the UAE. And if we're optimistic about the region, I'm optimistic about the region, this is a great place from which to reach the region. There are, 2 billion people within a 4 hours flight of here. And so this is an excellent base, not just to take advantage of the opportunities here within the country and within Abu Dhabi, but this is a great place to tap into all those opportunities outside within the broader Middle East region as well. And I know sort of Shamsi, this is sort of what your company has dedicated itself to. So I don't know, if I'd be interested to hear what you've seen in the broader region beyond.
So we believe that if you want to take healthcare into Africa, for example, we cannot do it purely based out of UAE. We hedge it with India because we want the workforce to come in. So that's the beauty of the window of what we call as the gateway to the world. So we can create the product here and take it to the rest of the world. So that is what an emerging markets, for example, we're doing a lab project right now, which is purely to serve the emerging markets. And you need the scale play. So one thing, what we see is the effectiveness of ADGM in all these things. We are all companies that are working out of ADGM, and it gives us so much transparency to strike partnerships, to bring in international investors, and the capital markets itself is very attractive for someone like me who came in 2007 to start my business. And today I have at least 3 companies that are listed in the stock markets between healthcare and education. So when we talk about bringing capital, we want to bring talent. And the first thing that talent looks for is healthcare and education. So again, this is the perfect ecosystem that the leadership, and the beauty of UAE is the speed of the leadership. So they move faster than any one of us. They think faster, they finish things faster. So I think it's a good catch up for us to do. The vision is much beyond even just UAE. It's the global play that we want to do. And AI is going to, I think, fuel the whole thing.
I wanted to round out the conversation by bringing it back to the new era of capital flows in a polycentric world. One of the things we're also thinking about is whether or not we're going to be entering a market environment, perhaps next year or in years to come, in which globalization, so the movement of goods, services, capital, ideas, data and information, and people actually slows. And I want your take on that, particularly as we look at the return of President Donald Trump in the White House next year. We could perhaps be seeing a more isolationist United States, one that ultimately focuses on what could be backwardization when it comes to globalization. So I want your take on that as well. Dean, did you want to start?
Sure. To speak about sort of the polycentric nature of globalization, I actually think what we're observing right now is that global flows haven't decreased meaningfully. Global flows have continued largely apace, but the nature of those global flows have changed, the patterns of those global flows. So it's no longer direct US-China, China-US. Now we're seeing China-Vietnam, China-Cambodia, Cambodia-US, Vietnam-US, right? And so I think what you're going to start observing, again, is that there will be a place for globalization. Globalization will continue apace, but the networks and the relationships will change. Right? So I think you'll have sort of broadly sort of the US sphere of relationships. You'll have the China sphere of relationships in East Asia. So now that's an opportunity actually for someplace else to step in for sort of the, let's call it Middle East, South Asia, Africa sphere. And sort of Abu Dhabi could be that place as a capital of capitals.
So there's maybe an opportunity for this region if we did see some of those trends starting to eventuate. Claire, can you speak to that as well?
Well, look, we're a global firm. We have a network of global offices because we're supporting global clients. And generally, our clients want us to help us give them market access in local markets, or their local firms that are looking to do more in their market or look outwards. So I don't feel too concerned about this. And I do think we have to put some context around. We've seen lots of announcements from the incoming administration. There's a sequencing and a scoping and a timing of policy implementation. And so our view is that probably implementation is slower, and that more moderate implementation actually means that the global economy can absorb the changes more carefully.
Hani?
Yeah, look, I think I agree. I think trade flows will find other avenues and supply chains will become more resilient, but investment flows will continue to be there to support the establishment of those new corridors. And so, if anything, over the past few years, we've seen cross-border investment flows continue to increase as different countries have established different corridors in order to support their exports. So that's kind of one thought process on this. And the other, I think, is, interestingly, the China Plus One has resulted in a lot of growth in places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and other places that are continuing to find new avenues to export into, frankly, everywhere. And the third, I would say, is if the US exceptionalism is there to stay over time, well, what a great opportunity to consider this the point in time opportunity to part with a past that is dependent on US consumers creating deficits in the US because they're buying all sorts of goods from everywhere, and then manufacturers and oil producers funding that deficit by buying US treasuries, and go towards an environment where you establish more consumer-led investment programs in regions all around the world. And that's what I consider to be a polycentric world. I think it's a healthy progression to a different type of an environment, and that's a positive thing.
Shamsher will give you the final say.
So we have seen the worst during COVID. We have seen protectionism to the extreme. But I think the beauty is what the vision of the country is already laid across, is to find a solution for the world problems, right? Healthcare, we have seen UAE at the forefront in sending aid to different parts of the world. We operate a US FTA factory out of Dubai, which is growing at ever fastest pace. So I think nothing is going to stop the inflow of capital into UAE, because where else in the world do you get such returns at such attractive rates with all the elements put into one? So I think this is going to stay. I think we are looking forward to the new alliances that will come. We normally leave that to our leadership. We are focused on business. We can be rest assured that these are things not in our pay grade. We do what we are good at by providing good healthcare and attracting people from different parts of the world.
And I think that's a great place to leave the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank them again. Shamsher, Hani, Claire, and Robert joining me on stage. Enjoy the rest of your day.